About what?
I need to make an announcement during the announcements.
Okay.
Caverly is going to do it, but she's late.
Oh, all right, because everyone's anxious about the time.
Okay.
So be ready to do it right away. Come, come, whoever you are welcome here. No matter your age, your size, the color of your eyes, your hair, or your skin, you are welcome here. No matter how you came here, if you came alone or with others, you are welcome here. No matter whom you love or how you speak or whatever your abilities, you are welcome here. Whether you come with laughter in your heart or tears in your eyes, you are welcome here. If you come with an open mind, a loving heart, and willing hands, then you are indeed welcome here. Good morning, and thank you for joining us. I am Henry Jermaine McCarthy, and my pronouns are he, him. Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Church of New Orleans, a congregation that has been gathered in love since 1833 to seek wholeness and work for justice in the world. If you're a visitor here in the sanctuary, we invite you to raise your hand so that we can greet you after the service. Our church is currently lay-led, and our Sunday services are conducted by members of our worship team. To provide the sermon and related words or music from the pulpit, we invite guest speakers. These include UU ministers, other religious professionals, and leaders from community organizations working for social justice, as well as our own members, to bring messages of hope, courage, and spiritual or intellectual growth. Providing that voice today is Emma Caverly. Welcome, Emma, and thank you for joining us and providing us as the sermon as worship leader. Emma's a lifelong resident of New Orleans and a member of our sister church, Community Church in Lakeview. For information about programming for children and families, the person to ask is Katie Gelfond in the front row on the aisle seat, our Director of Religious Exploration. After the time for all ages, children and youth are welcome to spend the service time either in the nursery or here in the sanctuary at the all ages activity table at the back. And all of the words and lyrics for the music and chalice lighting, unison readings and hymns, as well as the link to the text to give and church announcements are available by aiming your smartphone camera at the QR codes on the cards in the back of the chairs here in the sanctuary. And if you don't currently receive our weekly e-newsletter, please sign up to get on the mail list. And we have an announcement this morning. Yes, I do.
Okay. Good morning. I'm Jody Manali. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm here to announce that we're having a flash sale today, a flash auction in the fellowship hall right after the congregational meeting. We've got about 8 pieces of used furniture that we're selling very cheap, and we'd like to get them out as soon as possible because we have some renters coming in, and we'd like to get that out of the way. So I will be available. You go looking during the coffee hour. If you're not staying for the congregational meeting but you're interested, just let me know. Thanks.
Also, today is our quarterly congregational meeting after the service, and so we will be having it here in the sanctuary. So the fellowship time will be abbreviated so that we can just grab a cup of coffee or other beverage and a snack and join us in the circle here for our congregational meeting. And we will now have our call to awareness and amends. Please rise in body or spirit and join me as we read our call to awareness and amends and our chalice lighting. You'll find the call to awareness and amends at the QR code or in the back cover of the gray hymnal. I will read the regular text and you'll respond by reading the italicized text. We gather today at a crossroads, which means the place of many tongues. But we are newcomers to this land. Know that we gather the spoils of colonialism and broken treaties. Acknowledging this history is just the first step. Where we have harmed, where we have taken, where we have disparaged, just as the flame of our chalice We add life-giving water to earth. Only when we strive to make amends please remain as you are as we light the chalice of our heritage. So join me in reading the words that you will find in the order of worship or the QR code. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together. And now we will sing together hymn 151 in your gray hymnal, I Wish I Knew How.
I wish I knew how it would feel to be free. I wish I could break all those chains holding me. I wish I could say all the things I could say. Say 'em loud, say 'em clear, for the whole world to hear. Say 'em loud, say 'em clear, for the whole world to hear. I wish I could share all the love in my heart. Remove all the bars that still keep us apart. I wish you could know what it means to be me. Then you'd see and agree everyone should be free. Then you'd see and agree everyone should be free. I wish I could give all I'm longing to give. I wish I could love like I'm longing to live. I wish I could do all the things I can do. Though I'm way overdue, I'd be starting anew. Though I'm way overdue, I'd be starting anew. I wish I could be like a bird in the sky. How sweet it would be if I found I could fly. I'd sweat onto the sun, look down at the sea. Then I'd sing, 'cause I'd know how it feels to be free. Then I'd sing, 'cause I'd know how it feels to be free.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here today. Our opening words come from Frederick Douglass in The Nation's Problem, although I first came across these words in the book, How the Word is Passed. Our past was slavery. We cannot recur to it with any sense of complacency or composure. The history of it is a record of stripes, a revelation of agony. It is written in characters of blood. Its breath is a sigh, its voice a groan, and we turn from it with a shudder. The duty of today is to meet the questions that confront us with intelligence and courage.
morning. It's so nice to be back and see everyone. First, we have the traveling chalice, and I'm going to invite our chalice holders to come and share about their experience. The traveling chalice is an opportunity for someone in our congregation to take home one of our faith's most beloved symbols and engage in the hopefully daily spiritual practice of lighting the chalice. And there's a book in there that tells you everything you need to do, how to do it, and a sharing section where you can read about other people's experience and share about your own. Would you share a little bit about your...
So Dylan and I have had this for like literally since last year. So please don't feel like you have to take it and bring it back in a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. You can have it for 6 weeks. It's fine. Yeah, we first did our lighting. I think it was New Year's Eve. So that was a really special kind of time to sit. Oh, can you hear me now? We did our first chalice lighting on New Year's Eve. So that was a really special time to sit together and go through the book and see what this means to other folks in the group. Sorry, I don't know why I'm trying to. Yeah, so it's definitely something that you should bring home. My dog ate the crayons, so I've had to replace them. There's some nice glitter crayons now, so.
And I drew a picture in crayons of my cat.
So, yeah.
Okay, thank you both so much. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And yes, please don't feel pressure to bring it back soon. You can have it for a while. But now I would love to get a volunteer to take home the traveling chalice. If you are a part of our congregation, new, you visited a few times, you want to learn a little more about us, this is a great way. Also, if you're feeling kind of low right now, you need a little boost in your heart, a little brightening in your spirit, this will do that, I promise you. So do I have any volunteers? Wonderful. Will you come forward and introduce yourself, please? Have you had it before? Oh, yay. Wonderful. Also a new member.
Hi, I'm Madeline.
Yay. Madeline, new member. Wonderful. Yay, thanks, Madeline. Have fun. And now I'd like to invite those young and young at heart to join me on the carpet circle. Well, the young at heart are here in spirit or in our balcony. Oh, I see one coming. So exciting. Yes, please choose your favorite carpet circle color, as always. Okay, I'm just gonna get started while we're waiting. So this is a story called The Truth Crushed Down by Christopher Peace. Once upon a time, there was a very greedy king who had lots and lots of gold. He wanted even more gold, so he decided to get his army to attack a neighboring kingdom and steal all of their gold. The king called his soldiers into the courtyard to tell them his plan. The soldiers agreed to obey his orders. They drew their swords and lifted their shields and marched off into battle. The soldiers were not gone long from the castle before they returned to the courtyard. Not one of the soldiers was carrying a sword or a shield. "What happened?" screamed the king. "I told you to go fight a battle." "We were on our way," said Sire, said one of the soldiers, "when we came across an apple tree. The tree spoke to us, and it said, 'All men are brothers, all women are sisters, all non-binary people are siblings, and all the people of the earth are one family. Be wise and lay down your swords and shields and study war no more.' It seemed to us that the tree made sense, so we did what it said." The king was furious, and he vowed to get rid of the tree that had ruined his plans. He waited until midnight, and then he crept out of the castle and walked across the field until he came to the apple tree. He took out his axe, chopped down the tree. But he was so mad that he stomped on the fallen tree until it was crushed down into the earth. The king went back to his castle with a smile on his face. The next day, the king called his soldiers to the courtyard. He gave them new swords and new shields and told them to obey his orders and go attack the neighboring kingdom to get all the gold and bring it back. The soldiers were afraid of him, so they did what he said. But the soldiers were not gone long until they returned without their swords and shields once again. The king was again furious. "I told you to go fight a battle," said the king. "We were on our way, but we came to the spot where the tree was yesterday. You wouldn't believe it, but now there's 20 apple trees there, and they're all saying, 'All men are brothers, all women are sisters, all non-binary people are siblings, all the people of the world are one family. Be wise and lay down your swords and shields and study war no more.' And the tree made sense to us, so we did what they said." The king was red with anger. "Those blasted trees," he thought. "Tonight I will sneak out and chop down every last one." And that's what he did. But he was still so mad after chopping down all the trees that he jumped up and down until they were crushed down into the earth. The next day, the king called all the soldiers to the courtyard and gave them new swords and new shields and ordered them once again to go attack the neighboring kingdom and bring back all the gold. The soldiers were afraid of the king, so they obeyed him. But, can you guess what happened? More trees. The soldiers were not gone long until they came back, and the king screamed, "I told you to go fight a battle. Why do you disobey me?" Well, you wouldn't believe it, but the place where the 20 apple trees were, there's now a huge forest full of apple trees, and they're all saying, "I don't want to hear the rest," said the king. He knew what the trees were saying, and he ran out of the castle and where he saw the forest of trees that stretched as far as the eye could see. The king began to cry and scream because he knew that there was no way that he could chop down this many trees. "Can it be," he screamed, "that a powerful king like myself can be stopped by just a few trees?" "Are you asking me?" came a voice from behind him. The king turned and saw an old man leaning against the castle wall. His hair and beard were long and gray, and his clothes were well worn. "Well," the king said after a moment, "do you have an answer? If so, tell me now." "Well," said the old man, "it seems to me that you are a very powerful king." "Well, yes, I am, indeed," said the king. "And since you are so powerful, you can take any tree that offends you and chop it into little pieces and crush it into the ground." "Yes, you are quite right there. Yes, yes, you are," said the king proudly. "But," said the beggar, "the apple tree spoke the truth. All men are brothers, all women are sisters, all non-binary people are siblings, and all the people of the earth are one family. You may be a powerful king, but there is no king on earth more powerful than the truth. For the truth crushed down to the earth will rise again." May the truth prevail and multiply like the forest of apple trees in this story. Thank you, everyone.
To transition us into the time for meditation, I would like to read the words of Howard Thurman. "In the quietness of this place, surrounded by the all-pervading presence of the holy, my heart whispers, 'Keep fresh before me the moments of my high resolve, that in good times or in tempests, I may not forget that to which my life is committed. Keep fresh before me the moments of my high resolve.'" We will now enter into a few moments of silence, after which we will sing the meditation hymn, Voice Still and Small, number 391, and it's also in your order of service.
Voice still and small, deep inside all, I hear you call, singing. In dark and rain, sorrow and pain, still you remain, singing. Calming my fears, quenching my tears, through all the years, singing.
Our first reading comes from the book Black Reconstruction in America by W.E.B. Du Bois, which was first published in 1935. As such, references to today refer to the 1930s, and the language is reflective of the era in which it was written. Excerpts from the propaganda of history. We have too often a deliberate attempt so to change the facts of history that the story will make pleasant reading for Americans. The editors of the 14th edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica asked me for an article on the history of the American Negro. From my manuscript, they cut out all my references to Reconstruction. I insisted on including the following statement: white historians have ascribed the faults and failures of Reconstruction to Negro ignorance and corruption, but the Negro insists that it was Negro loyalty and the Negro vote alone that restored the South to the Union, established the new democracy for both for white and black, and instituted the public schools. This, the editor refused to print, although he said that the article otherwise was, in my judgment and in the judgment of others in the office, an excellent one, and one with which it seems to me that we may all be well satisfied. I was not satisfied and refused to allow the article to appear. War, and especially civil strife, leave terrible wounds. It is the duty of humanity to heal them. It was therefore soon conceived as neither wise nor patriotic to speak of all the causes of strife and the terrible results to which sectional differences in the United States had led. And so, first of all, we minimized the slavery controversy which convulsed the nation from the Missouri Compromise down to the Civil War. On top of that, we passed by Reconstruction with a phrase of regret or disgust. But are these reasons of courtesy and philanthropy sufficient for denying truth? Nations reel and stagger on their way. They make hideous mistakes. They commit frightful wrongs. They do great and beautiful things. And shall we not best guide humanity by telling the truth about all this, so far as that truth is ascertainable? Here in the United States, we have a clear example. It was morally wrong and economically retrogressive to build human slavery in the United States in the 18th century. We know that now perfectly well, and there were many Americans, North and South, who knew this and said it in the 18th century. Today, in the face of new slavery established elsewhere in the world, under other names and guises, we ought to emphasize this lesson of the past. Moreover, it is not well to be reticent in describing that past. Our histories tend to discuss American slavery so impartially that in the end, nobody seems to have done wrong and everybody was right. Slavery appears to have been thrust upon unwilling, helpless America while the South was blameless in becoming its center. The difference of development north and south is explained as a sort of working out of cosmic social and economic law. No one can read that first thin autobiography of Frederick Douglass and have left many illusions about slavery. And if truth is our object, no amount of flowery romance and the personal reminiscences of its protected beneficiaries can keep the world from knowing that slavery was a cruel, dirty, costly, and inexcusable anachronism, which nearly ruined the world's greatest experiment in democracy. No serious and unbiased student can be deceived by the fairy tale of a beautiful Southern slave civilization. One is astonished in the study of history at the recurrence of the idea that evil must be forgotten, distorted, skimmed over. We must not remember that Daniel Webster got drunk, but only remember that he was a splendid constitutional lawyer. We must forget that George Washington was a slave owner, or that Thomas Jefferson had mulatto children, or that Alexander Hamilton had Negro blood, and simply remember the things we regard as creditable and inspiring. The difficulty, of course, with this philosophy is that history loses its value as an incentive and example. It paints perfect men and noble nations, but it does not tell the truth. The most magnificent drama in the last 1,000 years of human history is the transportation of 10 million human beings out of the dark beauty of their mother continent into the newfound El Dorado of the West. They descended into hell, and in the 3rd century, they arose from the dead in the finest effort to achieve democracy for the working millions which this world had ever seen. It was a tragedy that beggared the Greek. It was an upheaval of humanity, like the Reformation and the French Revolution. Yet, we are blind and led by the blind. We discern in it no part of our labor movement, no part of our industrial triumph, no part of our religious experience. Before the dumb eyes of 10 generations of 10 million children, it is made mockery of and spit upon, a degradation of the eternal mother, a sneer at human effort, with aspiration and art deliberately and elaborately distorted. And why? Because in a day when the human mind aspired to a science of human action, a history and psychology of the mighty effort of the mightiest century, we fell under the leadership of those who would compromise with truth in the past in order to make peace in the present and guide policy in the future. In the interest of time, we will be skipping hymn 150. So I'll go straight into our second reading. Our second reading needs a little introduction. It comes from the book How the Word is Passed by Clint Smith, which is a wonderfully written and very accessible book about the history of slavery in this country and how that history is remembered. In each chapter, the author, who is a black man, visits a different place that is significant to the history of American slavery. This reading comes from an excerpt from the chapter on Blandford Cemetery, which is one of the largest Confederate cemeteries in the country. During one of his visits to Blandford, he observed an event that was organized by the Sons of Confederate Veterans. So much of the story we tell about history is really the story that we tell about ourselves, about our mothers and our fathers, and their mothers and their fathers, as far back as our lineages will take us. Throughout our lives, we are told certain stories, and they are stories that we choose to believe, stories that become embedded in our identities, in ways we are not always fully cognizant of. For many of the people I met at Blandford, the story of the Confederacy is the story of their home. of their family, and the story of their family is the story of them. So when they are asked to reckon with the fact that their ancestors fought a war to keep my ancestors enslaved, there is resistance to facts that have been documented by primary sources and contemporaneous evidence. They are forced to confront the lies they have upheld. They are forced to confront the flaws of their ancestors. As Greg Stewart, a member of the Sons of Confederate Veterans, told the New York Times in the aftermath of the 2015 Charleston massacre, "You're asking me to agree that my grandparents, my great-grandparents, and great-great-grandparents were monsters. Accepting such a reality would, for them, mean the deterioration of a narrative that has long been a part of their lineage, and the disintegration of so much of who they believed themselves to be in the world." But as I think of Blandford, I'm left wondering if we are all just patchworks of the stories we've been told. What would it take? What does it take for you to confront a false history, even if it means shattering the stories you have been told throughout your life, even if it means having to fundamentally re-examine who you are and who your family has been? Just because something is difficult to accept doesn't mean you should refuse to accept it. Just because someone tells you a story doesn't make it true. About 6 years ago, I attended a family reunion for my grandfather's family. It was in Houma, which is where that side of the family is from. If you aren't familiar, Houma is about an hour southwest of here. People who know me well could tell you that I am sometimes a little disorganized with details. And true to form, I did not actually ask for the address until the morning of the event. And so it came about that I learned at nearly the last possible moment that we would be having a family reunion at a plantation. I was caught off guard and a little alarmed. It turned out that the organizers of this reunion were looking for a large outdoor pavilion that would accommodate our group if, say, 200 people decided to attend, but would still be affordable if we only had 50. I have a very large extended family. There aren't many options in Houma, but they did find a pavilion, much like a shelter you might find in a public park. Little thought was given to the fact that it was located at Southdown Plantation. With this new information, I no longer felt quite so alarmed, and I chose to set aside any lingering feelings of discomfort and prepared to spend the day catching up with relatives that I know well and meeting others for the first time. When I arrived at the reunion, my older relatives were very excited. You see, in talking to the people who run the Southdown Plantation and Museum, the organizers had figured out the day before the reunion that their grandfather, my great-grandfather, had actually lived at the plantation as a young man in the 1920s. He stayed there with his great-aunt when he first moved from New Orleans to Houma. So of course we took the tour. The tour guide opened with something like this. The miners bought Southdown Plantation in Terrebonne Parish in 1828. They came from Natchez, Mississippi. By 1847, there were 203 slaves on the property. When they bought Southdown, the plantation house had not been built yet. The slaves built the house when the weather was too bad to work in the fields. And that's how I learned that my great-grandfather's great-grandfather, William J. Miner, was a slave owner. I've been thinking about it for 6 years, and I have yet to figure out what kind of weather in South Louisiana would be too bad for field work, but appropriate weather for construction work. I have started looking for more details about my ancestor, William Minor. So far, I have learned that he owned 4 plantations, 3 in Louisiana, 1 in Mississippi. In the year 1860, he owned 566 slaves altogether. 566 people held in bondage. 566 souls. And that is just a snapshot. Every year, some were born while others died. People were bought and sold. Just how many people were enslaved by members of my family? Learning that my ancestors were slave owners was an uncomfortable experience for me. It's an experience that I have thought about often in the years since. I'm still trying to work out what my relationship is with this information. But I am glad that I had that experience, because I didn't realize how I had avoided asking that question. You know, the one, did my ancestors enslave other people? It's not that I was ever confident that they didn't. If you had asked me before I confirmed the truth, I might have said, I don't know, maybe, probably, I hope not. I hope not is naive at best, because I knew that my family goes back pretty far in Louisiana, and I knew that at least some of my ancestors were wealthy. No one was wealthy in antebellum Louisiana without close connections to slavery. The entire Southern economy was built on slavery. So why didn't I know? Because we never talked about it. Why didn't we talk about it? Because my mom didn't know. No one ever talked about it when she was growing up. I wonder if my grandfather knew. It's too late for me to ask him. Surely his father must have known. He lived in the place where it happened, with someone who witnessed it. Did they ever talk about it? I want to say this about the family that I know today. Many of them are people of genuine faith, and I see in them people trying to make choices that make the world a better place. We may not all have the same understanding of what is necessary to achieve racial justice in our society, but we do agree that racial justice is essential, and that the imperative for it comes from the recognition that human dignity is inherent to all people. When I was little, my mom used to say, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. Usually in the context of telling my siblings and I to stop saying mean things to each other. This is generally good advice to live by. And I believe the world would be a kinder place if more people followed it. However, I question the limits of living by that rule. What truths have been lost in the service of being nice over several generations? I can't talk about this not knowing without talking about the lost cause. It is described in How the Word is Passed in this way. The lost cause is a movement that gained traction in the late 19th century that attempted to recast the Confederacy as something predicated on family, honor, and heritage, rather than what it was, a traitorous effort to extend and expand the bondage of Black people. The movement asserted that the Civil War was not actually about slavery, that soldiers and generals who fought in the war were honorable men who did so simply for their families and communities, not because of any racist antagonism. There are two parts to telling an effective lie. One is concocting the false tale of what happened. The other is hiding the evidence of the truth. In order to spin the tale that the slave states were a noble civilization based on honor, family, and duty, it was necessary to suppress or discredit the testimony of the people who had experienced the horrors of slavery. In order to claim that the Civil War was about something other than slavery, it is necessary to ignore the words of Confederate political leaders, the declarations of secession, and the Constitution of the Confederate States, which all explicitly state that the purpose of seceding from the Union was to preserve the institution of slavery. In order to claim that racist antagonism was not a significant motivator, it is necessary to forget the pattern of unspeakable violence against Black people after the Civil War. Forget the massacre in New Orleans in 1866. Forget the massacres in Opelousas and St. Bernard Parish in 1868. Forget Colfax in 1873. Forget the so-called Battle of Liberty Place, again in New Orleans in 1874. Forget Coshada in 1874 and Thibodeau in 1887. And that's just Louisiana. In short, the agricultural economy of the South was built on a system of chattel slavery. From 1619 to 1865, a system of laws was developed and expanded to deprive millions of people their innate, God-given rights to self-determination, bodily autonomy, and free will. Between the end of Reconstruction and the civil rights successes of the 1950s and 60s, formerly enslaved people and their descendants were systematically denied their basic human rights through both legal segregation and extra-legal terrorism. This is one way of summarizing our past. I think it is largely reflective of the truth. But there is something missing. Ownership. Personal connection. I could be talking about anywhere in the world. It sounds far away, long ago, someone else, somewhere else. It doesn't sound like my story. On one level, it's not my story. All of those things happened before I was born. Most of it happened before my parents were born. Let me tell you a different story about a different part of American history. My grandparents grew up during the Depression. In Michigan, my grandmother's family, on my father's side, struggled significantly. My grandmother wrote down some of the memories she had of her childhood. So I know a little about what she went through. She was one of 8 children. They lost their home. Her father went blind. They depended on the charity of a nearby monastery just to have a roof over their heads. Their family worked exceptionally hard just to put food on the table. When I read her words, I feel inspired by their resilience and more connected to the hardships that so many Americans experienced during the Great Depression. It's Black History Month, and we often talk about slavery in the context of Black history, in the stories of people like Frederick Douglass or Harriet Tubman. But never forget that slavery is not just Black history. Black people did not enslave themselves. Slavery is also white history. It is American history. And it is my family history. It is personal. Instead of talking about our history of slavery and racial oppression with words that sound far away, long ago, someone else, somewhere else, we need to remember that it was not that long ago, and many of us have personal connections to this chapter in our history. It is an uncomfortable and often painful process to reflect on the role of one's ancestors in the ugliest moments of our past. I encourage you to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. It is well understood that the vast majority of Black Americans are descended from people who were enslaved in this country. It is also a common claim that slave ownership was largely limited to a handful of wealthy elites. It is true that, according to the 1860 census, only 1.4% of the total free population are counted as slaveholders. But there are problems with that statistic. First, it includes the population of free states as well as slave states. It makes more sense to look only at the population of slave states. Second, what about the families of slaveholders? Wouldn't you consider the spouses and children of the head of household to be slaveholders in a practical, social, and moral sense, if not in a legal sense? I would. By comparing the number of slaveholders to the number of households, we can estimate that in 1860, 26% of families owned slaves in the slave states, 31% in the future Confederacy. In Louisiana, 29% of families owned slaves. Mississippi led the pack, with 49% of families owning slaves. 31% seems like a lot more than a handful of wealthy elites. What are the odds that some of your ancestors were among the 31%? Maybe you know that they were. Maybe they were, but you don't know. And maybe you aren't descended from slaveholders. Maybe you can trace your lineage back to Ireland or Italy or India in the late 19th century. Or maybe it was your parents who came to this country, or you. Even so, if you have friends and neighbors who have personal connections to slavery, is it really so far away? There is a statue in the sculpture garden in City Park that has always intrigued me. If you've been there, you've probably seen it. It depicts a metallic human figure with another human squatting on his shoulders, covering the first one's eyes. It continues upwards in the same fashion, with a third figure covering the eyes of the second, and so on. The people get smaller and smaller as they go up, until you can't quite tell where one ends and the next begins. The name of this piece is Karma, by the artist Doho Su. The law of karma in Buddhism is the law of cause and effect. Every action, every choice has an effect, not only on the wider world, but also on the soul of the actor. As we go through life, these effects on our souls shape the way that we react to events in the future. Through reincarnation, a person starts life not as a blank slate, but with some disposition to respond to the world in a certain way. I find the representation of karma in that statue to be fascinating. A person enters life, maybe lives out all their days, blinded by the actions and choices of their past lives. This is also a useful image for understanding our society and our families. How have the actions and choices of those who came before us shaped our understanding of the world we live in? To what extent are we, in the words of Clint Smith, patchworks of the stories we've been told? I don't believe that any of us is doomed to be forever trapped, forever blinded by the misconceptions learned in childhood. It takes effort, but we can take steps to take off the blindfold and discover something that is closer to the truth. When you learn about American slavery from school, from books, from museums, from conversations, ask yourself if there is an echo of the lost cause in the story you have been told. After the civil rights movement, great strides were made in removing the most pernicious lies from textbooks. But it is one thing to remove the lie. It is another to replace it with the truth. Recent projects have made accessible stories that were once ignored or forgotten. The Whitney Plantation has revolutionized the way the story of plantation life is told by focusing on the experience of slaves. The groundbreaking 1619 Project traces the history of slavery and its legacy using the words of historians, authors, and poets. Even so, there is resistance to hearing from new points of view. Florida and Texas have both passed laws to ban the use of any part of the 1619 Project in public schools as part of a broader effort to restrict the way that slavery is taught in school. There's a lot of fear surrounding the prospect of an honest accounting. Many people argue that further discussing the pain of the past will only serve to reinforce divisions. However, reflecting on our past need not be divisive. It can be healing. I am not proud to be descended from slaveholders. It is a shameful history. But I don't feel guilty about it either. And my goal today is not for you to leave here burdened by guilt. It is natural to feel guilt, anger, distress, or sorrow when confronting the true nature of slavery and our own connections to it. Take time to feel those emotions and process what you have learned. Then find your own path forward. How can you bear witness to the truth? Whether it is in conversations with family or friends, educating the next generation, or in fighting laws that seek to obscure our history. It is true that we cannot change the past, but we can change how it is remembered. In the words of Clint Smith, the history of slavery is the history of the United States. It was not peripheral to our founding. It was central to it. It is not irrelevant to our contemporary society. It created it. This history is in our soil, it is in our policies, and it must, too, be in our memories. Amen, Ashe, and blessed be.
Thank you, Emma, for that wonderful sharing and research and thought-provoking message. Generosity is a spiritual discipline. We can now practice our act of giving either by placing your offering in the collection plate or depositing it electronically by texting the word GIVE to 504-608-7030. Again, that number is 504-608-7030. Gifts to this community of faith are gratefully received. Let us acknowledge these gifts by reading together the words in your order of service. This gift from the abundance of my life blesses me, our ministries, and the world. Please stand in body or spirit and join in our chalice extinguishing, which is in your order of worship. We extinguish the chalice's physical flame, but we let it glow gently in our hearts. May it light your path and guide your way until we are together again.
Please join me in singing Bring Out the Festal. Jane will play it through once, and then we'll all sing it with the piano. Bring out the festal bread and sing songs of freedom. Shout with the slaves who fled and sing songs of freedom. What modern pharaohs live in arrogance crowned? Who shall be sent to challenge folly unbounded? Bring out the festal bread and sing songs of freedom. Shout with the slaves who fled and sing songs of freedom. Chains still there are to break, their days are not finished. Metal or subtle made, they're still not diminished. Bring out the festal bread and sing songs of freedom. Shout with the slaves who fled and sing songs of freedom. Still does resentment bind each brother and sister. Still do the plagues affect those rise as the river. Bring out the festal bread and sing songs of freedom. Shout with the slaves who fled and sing songs of freedom. Long be our journey, yet justice is worth it. Dance to Mary and help us to birth it. Bring out the festal bread and sing songs of freedom. Shout with the slaves who fled and sing songs of freedom. Oh people, lift your head, look to the mountains. Bushes of flame still call us, rocks still gush fountains. Bring out the festal bread, sing songs of freedom. Shout with the slaves who fled and sing songs of freedom.
Let us sing a song of freedom for all who have been liberated from bondage, for those who have liberated themselves, for those who have liberated others. But remember that the work of freedom is not done. Hold in your hearts those who are still bound by chains of ignorance, of hatred, of poverty, of injustice. Our work is to break those chains. Let us go forth with joy for what has been accomplished, and with determination to do the work that has yet to be done.
This ends our service. Is it on? No. This ends our service. But remember, you haven't just been to church, but you are the church. For those who are interested, we can come to the piano and sing our postlude song, Swing Low, Sweet Chariot.
So we want to circle our chairs up here. We're not in any hurry, but just as you can, we're going to circle chairs up here. Thank you. Yes, thank you for reading for just jumping in.